Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Hello everyone, welcome to another video at Ed Talks Film Redux. Super happy to be back. Happy New Year to everybody who showed up. And today we are going to be talking about everything I watched in December. I didn't watch so much in December that it was like an unfathomably long list, but there's some things I saw in December that I really want to talk about, and I figured doing something like this every month might not be such a bad thing as a new video series going into the New Year's. Thank you everybody, and let's get right into it. The first movie I saw this month was Mike Mills' latest film, Come On, Come On. I'm a fan of Mike Mills. 20th Century Women is one of my favorite movies that A24 has put out, but I think it's been 100% dethroned by this film. I love Mike Mills' black and white cinematography here, the on-screen cited sources, nuanced voiceover about the future as told by teenagers being interviewed in the film. It's a very stylish movie that is also able to nail naturalism in the movie to a T. Joaquin Phoenix, Gabby Hoffman, and Woody Norman have such a real feeling relationship to each other in the film that at times I really forgot that I was watching a bunch of actors acting and that I was watching a real family on screen that had a serious need for therapy. Benedetta is the latest film by Paul Verhoeven, a director I admit I've not seen much of besides RoboCop. This medieval tale of a girl who has somewhat apocalyptic and erotic visions of Jesus really struck me with its premise. I found the look into the politics of spirituality in the film to be quite fascinating. I also kind of saw it as a bit of a house of cards inside of a nunnery. There's some really cool and albeit brutal, shocking moments in the film. If you're a fan of Paul Verhoeven, I'm sure this film will have a lot to offer you. To me personally, I didn't get too much out of it. However, I did quite enjoy myself for most of it. Shakespeare is something that I have a love-hate relationship with a bit. I read a lot of Shakespeare in high school and I really like doing it, but when it comes to Shakespeare movies, sometimes I don't always get what I want out of them. So when it comes to movies based on Shakespeare though, I do get very excited, and how could I not be excited by a Macbeth movie directed by Joel Cohen? And I'll tell you what, I wasn't disappointed at all. From the very start, I was in. The black and white film noir cinematography blew me away. Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand really kill it as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth in this movie. And one of the best things for me personally about this movie was getting to see an IMAX event with a ton of other film fans in Boston. At the end, everyone was clapping, and if I'm being honest, it was well worth the applause. One of my favorite things about the movie though was the sets. I didn't even really know half of it was sets until I watched them talk about it later in the special live streamed Q&A that they did. Amazing movie. Full disclosure, Paul Thomas Anderson might be my favorite director of all time, and I've seen Inherent Vice way more than my fair share of times, but this time it was really special going to see this movie because I got to see it projected in 70mm with two friends who had never seen the movie before. And honestly, it was such a fun time in the movies. Everyone in the theater was cracking up at the absurd jokes and the antics of the film. This honestly had to have been one of my favorite in-theater experiences so far that I've had this year, and maybe ever, honestly. It was that awesome. Now, this is kind of a weird one. Tomorrow night is the first feature film by writer, director, editor, producer, actor, stand-up comedian Louis C.K. And I was looking for a quick movie to watch with a friend, and we found this. If I were to best describe this movie, it would be like if Clerks met Eraserhead. It's got a lot of crude and inappropriate moments in it that range from laugh out loud hilarious to utterly baffling, but it also has a lot of weirdly melancholy and often surreal moments at the same time. Something that honestly shouldn't surprise me as a fan of Louis C.K.'s other more well-known work, Louis. Also, J.B. Smoove has maybe some of the funniest dialogue and performance I've ever seen in a movie, I think ever. He's ridiculously hilarious in this film. Full disclosure, I wasn't really on board with MCU Spider-Man for a long time, really since he first appeared in Civil War. However, Spider-Man No Way Home changed that for me. Now, I am kind of fatigued by Marvel superhero movies. I'm glad that the stuff I loved as a kid is being made into movies, but that doesn't change the fact that for me it's gotten kind of stale over the last couple years. No Way Home is, however, the first MCU movie that's come out since Infinity War and Endgame that's honestly blown me out the water. I feel like they really committed themselves to making a Spider-Man movie that was committed to making Peter Parker mature by having him go through some of the hardest and most sad and painful experiences he's ever had to go through. And that's really what I've been dying to see in the MCU Spider-Man movies. I'd say that they delivered on it big time this time. This is one of the most fun times I've ever had watching an MCU movie as well. There are some great surprises in it, not to mention an epic fight between Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in the movie that honestly had me smiling ear to ear. For those of you who don't know, I like Ingmar Bergman, quite a bit actually. Winter Light might be one of my favorite movies of all time. And I bought the ridiculously expensive Ingmar Bergman Cinema Blu-ray box set from Criterion, and I was seriously lacking on watching more Bergman movies lately. And man, I forgot how much I love Autumn Sonata. This was a movie I'd only seen once years ago, and getting to see it again, I can see why I've had this very positive impression of the film for so long in my mind. From the opening credits, I was grabbed. The performances by Ingrid Bergman and Liv Ullmann are some of the best performances I think I've seen in any movie ever. I love the idea of tackling a toxic relationship between a mother and a daughter that really comes down to deeply repressed and unsaid frustrations that built up over time until they boil over in this film. The film also at times feels like a play on screen, which usually isn't a great thing to hear, but this time I think it really worked in this film, and I'm so happy I threw that in there this past month. I watched The Company Men on a day where I really wanted to watch something but couldn't really find anything, so I picked something that's been on my watch list at random basically. It stars Ben Affleck, Chris Cooper, and Tommy Lee Jones as employees of a Boston shipping company that has made massive budget and personnel cuts after the 2008 financial crisis. I really didn't know what to expect from this movie. I kind of thought it was going to be some dark corporate conspiracy film like Michael Clayton, but honestly it was a multifaceted look at how people can be greatly affected by something they can't control and what they're willing to do in order to get ahead and not sink. It was a much lighter hearted movie than I was expecting, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some severely dark moments in this movie. Sometimes it's oppressively bleak, but it had some great performances in it. Specifically Tommy Lee Jones and Ben Affleck, I really think they nailed it. Chris Cooper also does a really good job, as he always does. Honestly, it's a pretty good movie. It's also shot by Roger Deakins, so if you're looking for something to watch, maybe you're interested in some sort of 2008 financial crisis mood, I guess, be a weird mood to be in, then this is a movie for you to watch. Light Sleeper is everything I love about Paul Schrader as a writer-director. Loner main character in a profession he doesn't find fulfillment in, pushed to the edge by a world that has seemingly gone mad. I loved every second of this movie. Willem Dafoe really never disappoints. Susan Sarandon also has some great moments in this movie. We have some really epic music that pulses through the movie during some scenes to blood-pumpingly good levels. It culminates in a finale that's not only reminiscent of probably Paul Schrader's most famous film, but also a tribute to one of Paul Schrader's own favorite movies ever. I'm a big Schrader fanboy, and this movie put a huge smile on my face, and I think anybody who is really familiar with Schrader's work, who loves Schrader's work, will get a kick out of Light Sleeper if they haven't already seen it. Next on the list, we have Sean Baker's Red Rocket. Sean Baker is a director that has made two films that I feel completely opposite about. I love The Florida Project, and I didn't really have a good experience watching Tangerine, and Red Rocket feels like it falls somewhere in the middle of those two films for me. Simon Rex, playing a narcissistic adult film actor who's fallen out of good graces with basically everyone he's met, provides for some really hilarious moments that really made this movie entertaining. There's a lot of really sleazy, dark stuff happening in the film, and the film's sort of oddball sense of humor really made that palatable. The ending confused me a bit, and honestly I'm still trying to figure it out, but I think Red Rocket was a strong outing for Baker overall. And I still can't wait to see what he does next, even if I do have a little bit of mixed opinions about this one. If I'm being honest, besides Dune, Licorice Pizza was my most anticipated movie of the year. As I said earlier, I'm a huge fan of PTA, and now PTA working with the very talented musical group Haim and Cooper Hoffman as the son of the late master Philip Seymour Hoffman in a film that takes place during the 70s, I'm in. I'm all in. And I'll tell you, I got a real kick out of this movie. I love the cast. I think basically everyone who walks onto the screen kills it. Cooper Hoffman really nails this role as a scrappy young actor who is also kind of a bit of a hustler. Alana Haim really holds her own amongst everyone in the film and has honestly some of the best moments in the film. It's really funny, really stylish, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of my favorite parts of the movie, which was seeing Tom Waits and Sean Penn in a scene involving a bar. I've never smiled as big as I think I have at all this year, as big as I did when Tom Waits showed up in this movie and delivered some of the funniest, most amazing dialogue I think I've seen from any character this year. Honestly, I loved Licorice Pizza. Mass tackles a subject that is really sensitive nowadays, that being school shootings. It's not a far cry to say that this has been on the minds of many people over the course of the last 20 years. And most movies, when tackling the subject matter, might want to get overtly political about it. But Mass does something very different that I appreciated. Mass almost entirely removes the politics from the discussion. It instead focuses on the parents of a child who died in a school shooting and the parents of that shooter. It puts them in a room and you watch them talk. What comes next is one of the most explosive, traumatic, and ultimately enthralling movies of the year, which is crazy because it's just 4 people sitting around a table talking. I think there's a strong message about what people want to do when something tragic happens, which is to find someone or something to blame. And it really deconstructs that emotion over the course of 2 hours. And I really loved it, and I think it has a lot to say about how we react to many things nowadays in the current political climate. I'll be honest with you guys, I really liked Army of the Dead. A Zack Snyder directed heist movie that takes place in a zombie apocalypse really sounded like magic to my ears, and I think he delivered. I know Snyder is a really controversial filmmaker, but it's those very elements that have made him controversial that have made him one of my favorite filmmakers to date. Now, does this mean that Army of the Dead was perfect in my opinion? No. There were moments where I was confused by some of the character decisions that had been made, and it in no way, though, killed the wild, dark, and often really epic in a bonkers way ride that was this movie. It also had possibly one of my favorite movie endings of the entire year. I mean, it was bleak, it was dark, it was also kind of comedic, and honestly, I think Snyder hit us with another banger. Speaking of controversial, the final film that I watched in 2021 was Adam McKay's latest film, Don't Look Up. Honestly, I still haven't made up my mind about this movie. I loved Vice, I loved The Big Short, and some of the best parts of those films really make themselves at home in this movie, like Hank Corwin's editing. Leo and Jennifer Lawrence really deliver some great and often really comedic performances in the movie that I really loved. The film tackles a lot and attempts to balance comedy with a really dark, bleak, tragic event. It wants to relate it to events that are currently experiencing now. If I were to choose a film that dealt with despair over the climate crisis, though, I think I'm picking First Reformed over this one. There's a lot to like in this movie, but there's also a lot I'm still battling with and trying to decide how I feel on. And those were all the movies I saw in December of 2020. Thank you guys for watching this video. Really, really appreciate it. Please comment, rate, subscribe if you want to see more videos about movies, Criterions, Blu-rays, all that good stuff. There's a lot of stuff I'm hoping to do with this channel in 2022. And yeah, just stick around, and I hope you guys will get to be on this journey with me. See you guys later.